Kati Marton doesn't need an introduction, but it is polite to give one. So I will say this about her. She is the New York Times best-selling author of 10 books, including True Believer, Stalin's Last American Spy, and Enemies of the People, My Family's Journey to America, and of course the book that we're discussing tonight, The Chancellor. Apart from all the awards that she's won, I did want to note, very importantly, that outside of her work as a journalist, Kati, of course, is a great advocate of press freedom, of the cause of refugees, and of the cause of human rights around the world. So she's just the type of person who we like to welcome here to the school, even if she had not written a path-breaking and quite important book on Angela Merkel. But she has, and that's why we have her here. So I'll just ask you to give me a big round of applause welcoming Kati.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
So let's just start right at the big framing of the book, which is that you describe Merkel as a triple outsider. What does that mean?
Before I plunge into that, if I may, thank you for that lavish introduction, and thank you all, dear Torontonians. Sorry, well, I already blew it. For showing up in what is less than welcoming weather. And how reassuring it is that you still value the human presence. And let me assure you that I'm not a chatbot, I'm not a hologram, I'm an actual, deeply flawed but actual person. So thank you for endorsing the role that human beings still play. Yeah. And now to the Chancellor, who I do describe as a triple outsider. She is, by the way, an astonishing character, and I was changed in the process of trying to decode her these last 4 years. She is a triple outsider because she was from the East. She was 35 years old when she first crossed from East Berlin to West Berlin. 35, so not a kid. I'm a refugee myself from Soviet-occupied Budapest, in common with your founder,
yes.
Peter Munk. Different generation, however. But she was an adult when she crossed, and she was not only from the East, she was also a scientist. She was a physicist. And third and most important, she was a woman in a male political culture. I think Germany is unique in Europe in never even having had a queen. So a great many barriers for this astonishing person to overcome, and overcome them she did.
So talk about if you will, talk about how that mattered for her entry into the CDU and the process by which she became, at once kind of mentored but also held back within the party, and just,
yeah.
I mean, for those who haven't read the book, it's a remarkable story about her ascent through the party. So tell us about how that happens all the way up to her confrontation with Kohl.
Well, I mean, she is not the person you expect. She projects the image of this very straight-laced, rather puritanical, rather dowdy. That's a politically incorrect word, I'm sure. But she prided herself on not glamorizing herself and in not playing the game as others played it. And this turned out to be a huge asset because she was underestimated every step of the way. Including by her, the man who really launched her spectacular career, Helmut Kohl, the titanic figure of post Cold War Germany, the man more responsible for unifying East and West Germany than any other. She was chosen by Kohl to be his youngest minister, first portfolio women and youth. And I have to tell you, some of you in this room knew my husband, Richard Holbrooke, and the one and only time that I had a meal with the Chancellor, because let me assure you that she did not want this or any other book written about her that would get beneath the surface of the Bundestag, which was not my passion. Anyway, the one and only time that she actually asked to have dinner with my husband, who had just negotiated the end to the war in Bosnia. And Merkel typically always wants to learn from people who do their jobs well. And they were off to a rocky start because Richard, as you know, is a rather blunt-spoken person, and he leaned in and said, "Angela, you're not interested in women. You're not interested in children. What's this portfolio about?" And she got rather, "What do you mean I'm not interested in my portfolio?" But anyway, subsequently they had a chance to work together on many issues and got along fine. But that was a major digression. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great one. Yeah.
So she outplayed even Kohl, because Kohl, although he had picked her, he didn't see that she had it in her to be absolutely ruthless when necessary. And it became necessary when her mentor was caught in a kickback scheme. He was taking donations from donors whose names he refused to disclose. And Merkel chose party and country over personal debt, personal relationship, and wrote an absolutely devastating op-ed in the Frankfurter Allgemeine, which everybody read in Germany. The headline was, "It's time for Helmut to go," basically. And it might as well have been, "The king is dead, long live the queen," because that op-ed, which no one else in the party would have had the nerve to write, demonstrated that she had courage, and that she was declaring herself the new leader. And from that was 1998, and basically it was a glide path to the chancellery after that.
So I have to tell you that when I read the book the first time, and I came to this passage, and I knew about it in the back of my mind somewhere. Courage was one thing that came to my mind, but guile was the other. And I think that I mean, Kohl understands it to be a betrayal. What she did to him, right?
Never forgave her.
Yes.
Because for Kohl, like for so many other politicians, Bill Clinton comes to mind, politics is all about personalities and personal debts, and not for Merkel. Merkel actually doesn't love politics, she plays it well, she plays it strategically, but unlike Clinton or I can't think of a Canadian who maybe Brian Mulroney loves the game, loves the glad handing, loves to press the flesh, gets pumped in crowds. I mean certainly I've observed that with Bill Clinton. No, Merkel in her off hours does not seek out politicians. She likes to hang out with actors, with musicians, with almost any sort of quirky, creative people. And this is something that actually, again, a major digression, but something that she had in common with Obama. I spent quite a bit of time on that relationship, which was not a smooth one at all times. But one thing they had in common is that neither likes politics or politicians. So that was both of them like other sort of people.
And there's this wonderful moment, right, in the last third of the book where you describe the last dinner that she has with Obama.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Very poignant. It's
a very nice end to a rocky relationship.
Yeah. Well, the rocky relationship was don't forget, she had her personal cell phone tapped by Obama, which was an incredible violation for a woman who grew up under the Stasis, under the most complete surveillance state, far more than even the Gestapo had been. And so she is, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that she's paranoid about privacy. And when it came to light that the Obama White House was tapping her phone, that kind of froze Berlin and Washington's relationships it was a wasted year, as the American ambassador in Berlin told me, just a complete wasted year. And by the way, they got nothing because she is way too canny to ever say anything into her cell phone that she wouldn't say. So it was stuff like, where are we having dinner?
Yes.
But it spoiled that relationship. And Obama needed her when once Assad made his move in Syria, and above all, Obama needed her to handle Putin.
Yes.
The key, I think everybody now is interested in the relationship with Putin, because we're all absolutely stunned and devastated by this unprovoked and treacherous war, which I maintain would not have happened had she not left the chancellery when she did, because she alone among world leaders was able to get through to Putin. They have a perfect understanding of each other, both of them products of the same foundation, Soviet
Yes.
foundation.
Yes.
She in East Germany, he in Russia, obviously. They literally speak each other's languages, because she had to learn Russian as a student, and he learned Russian as a KGB agent in Dresden. So in one of my brief conversations with her late in the writing process, because although she never sat down she doesn't do sit-down interviews where she bears her soul, what she allowed me, which in some ways was more valuable, was to observe her at work. She knew whenever I was in the chancellery, and I did befriend her. She has a tiny trusted circle, 3 people, and I befriended 2 out of the 3, and that was tremendously helpful. But in one such encounter with her, I said, "What language do you and Putin speak in?" And she said, "Well, we used to speak entirely in Russian, because my Russian was very good, but now his German has gotten better than my Russian, so we speak." But isn't that kind of odd that Putin, who has now declared that he is opposed to all things German and European and Western, is bilingual, German Russian.
Yes.
But beyond her linguistic asset with Putin, because she understands what a KGB training is about.
Yes.
Because she herself was a victim of
Yes.
Stasi
Yes.
surveillance. I described
Yes.
incidents. So she's absolutely aware of his capacity for cruelty and deception, and nothing about him surprises her. And Putin knows that he can't pull off his usual tricks with her, that she's onto him, and that, for 16 years, that worked to all our advantage, and we miss that.
We might come back to it, because it's a very big
Yes,
counterfactual
yes,
that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine were she in office, and I'm still wrapping my head around it. But I want to stay on the Russia line. So to jump back into the beginning of the book, she visits Russia as a young person, right? And of course, she learns the language. How do these?
She's also picked up and held.
Yes. So how do these early experiences shape her orientation towards Putin and towards Russia, and then how she thinks about even the East German state when she's a young person?
Peter, like all things Merkel related, it's a complicated story, because she loves Russia, and she loves the Russian literature, culture, music. She's read all the great Russian authors, and she at the same time, because she grew up in a country that was occupied by Russia, she is also extremely wary of, and she's not the first German head of state who's been wary. It was Bismarck who said the secret to a good policy for Germany is to make a treaty with Russia, because you just have to look at the map to understand that. So she, some people now kind of fault her for being bamboozled by Putin. Not at all. She was not, but she is a very practical-minded person. She believes one of her favorite sayings is the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So she's always weighing. She's not a person of impulse. She weighs things before she moves, and she saw an advantage in keeping open channels, not only to Russia but to Xi Jinping. She made more visits to Beijing than any other head of state. But now she's faulted because we all need a scapegoat. How did we get to this disaster? So a lot of Germans now fault her for not being tough enough, yes, and for allowing Germany to be over-reliant on Russian energy, on Russian fuel. And I hope we get to that, because that's a whole other.
No, I'd like to hear your views on. I'd actually like to hear your views on what you think her views are on her orientation towards Russia. Do you think she thinks she made mistakes? Do you think that building out the pipelines and building a huge German appetite for Russian gas and shutting down their nuclear power and all this stuff? I mean, do you think she looks back on it and thinks,
look, this is by no means, this is not a hagiography.
No, not at all.
I deal with her blind spots, and like all of us, she has blind spots, and one of them is perhaps overlearning history. By overlearning history, I mean German history, which the idea of tanks, German tanks, rolling across Europe, and having the world cheer that fact, as we have recently been doing at the sight of Leopard tanks finally rolling toward Ukraine. That for her was an utter failure of diplomacy and policy, because she hates war with a vengeance. I wouldn't say she's a pacifist, but she does think that war should always be the last result, which is why I started to say that she and Obama had their differences, and one was that she opposed the war in Iraq. That was not on Obama's watch, that was his predecessor, but also on Syria, when Obama wanted when Obama said that he would not negotiate with Assad, the butcher of Damascus and Aleppo, she was horrified by that statement, because her way would have been get him to the table, and then announce, as Obama announced, that that Assad has to go. That was Obama's line. And on Ukraine, Ukraine won. That is to say, 2014, when Putin first dispatched his military into Crimea. Obama basically handed off the negotiation for the West to Merkel, because he said, I can't talk to this guy. He lies to me morning, noon, and night.
Yes.
Well, guess what? He lies to her morning, noon, and night too. But she had the sort of patience, unbelievable patience. I mean, sometimes when she was negotiating with him, even for just an inch of ground, she said the only way she could tell the time of day was whether they were serving bread and jam or a roast. So she would stay at that table in Minsk.
Yes.
For 13 hours at a stretch. Now, who does that?
Yeah.
Certainly no one I can think of.
Let me ask you, I know folks are writing out questions. Let me ask you about her relationship with another complicated leader. You have a whole chapter on her relationship with Donald Trump. Such as it was.
Her least favorite head of state.
And what was remarkable to me about it is, and it shouldn't be surprising given that she's a scientist and a student and remarkably conscientious, but the amount of work she put into getting ready for Trump, to thinking about how to deal with him.
More than for any other.
Yeah, talk about that and what it tells us about her.
Well, she did something which I wonder if anybody in this room would ever do. She watched an entire season of The Apprentice in preparation. It was good preparation. So she got his MO for shaking people up, for destabilizing situations. So she
read his book, The Art of the Deal.
And
he hasn't even read it, and she read it.
He certainly didn't write it. So she at the outset was told by, she has many Republican friends. I mean, among them Henry Kissinger is a mentor of hers, who all advised her, just make deals with him. He's about deals, and get over there fast, and everything with this guy is personal. So build a relationship with him, and she really tried that. She even invited Ivanka Trump to attend a conference that she was. I mean, she's canny. But Trump was extremely uneasy in the presence of such a brilliant woman, and as was Putin. And in fact, they both tried in their own way. Putin, with his KGB training, was aware that she was afraid of dogs because she had been bitten as a child. So at their first meeting, he unleashed his black lab, Coney, who went straight for Merkel. And the look of terror on her face, her team, I interviewed them, afterwards said, I mean, that was just beyond the pale. That was appalling. And she said, no, it's all he's got. He doesn't have a good policy. He doesn't have a good economy. He has to demonstrate his manhood. I mean, same thing with Trump. She managed, both with Putin and with Trump, to make them look ridiculous and kind of pathetic. So with Trump, actually at a conference here in Charlevoix, a G7 conference, hosted by your prime minister, Trump fished out, some gross-looking candy from his pocket and tossed it at her, and saying, "Don't say I never gave you anything, Angela." And everybody around the table looked horrified. I mean, to throw a piece of old candy at the Chancellor of Germany, she pretended she didn't notice, and that's her power move. Is not. I mean, I learned so much. I don't want to run for office, be assured, but what I learned from her about self-control and waiting for the moment to make your move, and not giving away what you're thinking, just pocketing things. And that has, we don't have time to go into every time that move worked for her, and how, we like to reduce public people to, one quality or another. Well, she's a multitude of qualities, and in addition to being brilliant with a photographic memory, which also is a huge asset, and in negotiation, that also was her greatest asset, is that she had a grounding in the minutia of, she said she knew every tree in the Donbass. And she probably did. So that was her. Nobody could pull off anything over her, because she would say, no, that's actually not a fact.
Yes, and remarkable physical stamina.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Right.
She could go for days without. She says that she's like a camel. She stores up sleep,
Right.
and then when the crisis has passed, then she sleeps for several days.
Yes, yeah. But the experience of being a bench scientist and working over and over at things, right, is what you get out of the early part of the
Exactly,
book, and
the
it carries
discipline.
through. We have a question from. I want to talk to you about the writing of the book in a little bit, but we've got a question from the audience, which I think is a very important one, about Merkel's approach to Israel.
Very important.
So just talk about her own, how her personal convictions mattered for that, but also how she dealt with this,
Yeah.
obviously remarkably complex, fraught,
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
difficult file for any German chancellor to
Great
take up
question.
responsibly.
Yeah. So, like most East Germans, she knew practically nothing about the Holocaust because the East German mythology was that the communists were the victims of the Nazis, and even in the East German concentration camps like Sachsenhausen and. The most of the credit goes to the great communist fighters who were victims of Hitler. So she was late to learn about the what actually happened. In 1985, the German president von Weizsäcker gave a momentous speech in which he said for the first time that Germany has a permanent debt to the Jewish people, and that the Holocaust is unique in history. And she got a copy of that. She was still living in East Germany. She got a copy of that speech. This is, mind you, 5 years before she crossed from east to west, and that's when she started on her own researching. Not only the Holocaust, but the history of Jews in Germany and so on. So on one of her very first trips to Israel, she addressed the Knesset, the first German head of state to do so. There were people who walked out. And she started off in Hebrew and gave an astonishing speech in which she tied Germany's raison d'etre to that of Israel, to the security of Israel, and declared that Germany's shame and Germany's debt to the Jewish people is everlasting. So that's quite something to tie one nation's reason for being with that of another.
Yes, yeah, and to do it at the level of the chancellor, rather than it being what it was up to that point, which was viewed as the personal responsibility of Germans, right?
Yeah.
And for a government that they all turned their back on. Let me ask you about the latter part. Really, her last term. What comes out a little bit. What came out a little bit to me near the end of the book was almost a certain bewilderment by her about what was happening in Germany. She seemed to be both. She didn't really, almost like she didn't know what to do with Alternative for Deutschland, the far-right populist nativist party that won something like 1 in 5 votes in the 2017 election, mattered for the parliament, and she effectively refused to engage with them. But I took from that something of almost her feeling like she didn't understand what was happening in the country, and almost. As though she didn't understand why the reaction to all of the migration that had occurred, why that reaction came up the way it did. Was it her sort of, was this her kind of refusing to just accept the reality of people opposing this, or was she genuinely bewildered? Like what was she thinking at that point?
Yeah.
She seems lost actually at that point in time.
Absolutely. So, two crucial things. One that we haven't touched on yet. Are we okay for time?
More than fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before I deal with the Alternative for Deutschland, indeed a blind spot of hers. I think that she will be known. I think her most important legacy, apart from the obvious putting putting to rest forever and any remaining questions we may have about a woman's capacity to lead. I think that that is her vaunting accolade, is that one's off the table now. But the fact that she allowed 1 million Middle Eastern refugees from wars that Germany had nothing to do with, we Americans had much more to do with, coming from Afghanistan, Syria, and 1 million. I think we in the States took in 20,000 that year under Obama, and those 1 million have now been largely assimilated, settled, leading productive lives. Those are lives that she can claim as having salvaged. And she did it in her typical Merkelian way, very low-key, no speeches. She's a terrible speaker, by the way, and is well aware of that. But that too is kind of an oddly an asset, because you know, Germany being a country that people have memories of torchlight parades and rousing speeches, so they valued that quality in her, which most of us would not in our countries. But she never gave a big speech about why it's in Germany's interest to take in 1 million Middle Eastern refugees. And thus she turned Germany into not only the economic powerhouse of Europe, which it already was, but the moral center. I mean, wrap your head around that. You know, 2 generations from the Third Reich. But the AfD is the direct result of that. The Alternative für Deutschland, which is mostly an East German phenomenon. 20% of East Germans voted for the AfD. Only 12% of the overall population did. And they did so because they felt not that they were losing their jobs or pensions or whatever, but it was this feeling which we're experiencing in my country, that of displacement, that social displacement. And she never dealt with the fact that, okay, so she made this brilliant start, restarted her engine when the wall fell in 1989. But a whole lot of her fellow East Germans could not make that transition, especially people of a certain vintage. And those people, and by the way, mostly men, sorry guys, it's a male problem.
It's a common pattern.
Angry, and I mean, we have the same phenomenon in the States. You know, the angry, displaced white man. She should have gone to the East. She should have, you know, a more canny politician would have been all over that. But she's a hyper-rational person, and she doesn't understand. You know, we chose to join the West. She would say. You know, this wasn't foisted on us. The East, you know, our system was broken. We absolutely wanted to be part of West Germany. Okay, that's a rational person, but you know, there's a large emotional irrational element in most humans, and she. It's her, perhaps her scientist training, or I don't know, but she missed that boat.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing for people who don't feel relative status loss to understand it, right? That some people actually don't care about absolute things; they care about how they're doing vis-a-vis someone else, and that's not a rational way of scientific way of thinking about things. But is there? Do you reckon that another? I want to ask a question about her legacy, and I'll come at it this way, which is that if the chance of Germany today, if there was a conflict in Europe or in Europe's periphery, and the Chancellor of Germany said, "Let's take in 1 million refugees," could another chancellor do it now that Merkel's done it? right? Or has it so scarred people and made them, they look at the AfD coming up and they look at the reaction to that, despite all the good that it actually brings, right? Is this one of these things where she's the only person who could have done that, and now we kind of mistake Germany for being Merkel's Germany, but actually it can't do the things that she was able to do?
Well, I mean, I'd like to give her full credit, but I mean, Germany has proven to be a very, in many ways, admirable and mature democracy. I mean, just look at the transition from Merkel to her successor, Scholz. The way, she wasn't asking for a recount. She wasn't threatening to come back. She was, it was all so serenely and peacefully done, and they relish their boring politics. And Scholz certainly fills the bill for that.
He sure does. I mean, they don't look like a leader in Europe right now, from my vantage point, I have to say, right? The way that they did when Merkel was chancellor.
No, but I mean, she had an authority that came partly from her extraordinary journey. I mean, the one we've been discussing, whereas Scholz is a rather conventional politician. And here was this woman who had broken every glass ceiling, every barrier, and also, I keep mentioning that she's brilliant. I mean, people are dazzled by the intelligence. That's what you remember about her is her retention.
Yes.
And the fact that she is. She approaches politics from a historian's perspective.
Yes.
She sees the big game, not. And can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I see
we've
got a lot of questions.
No, I've got a good. Yes, as many things as you like.
And that is that she's invented, as far as I'm concerned, a new brand of politics, which sounds almost like an oxymoron. It's ego-free politics.
Yes.
So one of her strongest legacies is that she never personalized the office. Hence her ability to walk out of the chancellery and move right back into her rent-controlled apartment in the heart of Berlin.
Yes.
Never accumulated castles, yachts. Hard to imagine Merkel on a yacht.
Yes.
None of the trappings of 16 years as the most powerful, by some lights, most powerful politician in the world, and it was never about her. It was she was looking at the people. She was not looking in the mirror, which is. I can't think of too many. I'm sorry to be beating up on you guys, but I can't think of too many men who practice that brand of ego-free politics, where the office doesn't become the man.
Yes.
Where
it's very hard to think of it.
I've done my service, 16 years, enough. Now I'm going to go and travel and live the life for the first time in Merkel's case, because 35 years under Stasi, then 16 years under total surveillance from security. She's living the life that she never experienced without the usual claptrap of power.
Yes.
It's quite a.
But this is the question now that hangs over
Yeah.
Germany, right? And I think it hangs over any country when you've had a giant leave the field. Is how much of it falls apart because it was held together by the force of this person, right? As opposed to institutions or the parties.
But it hasn't
or
fallen apart.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't.
I mean, that's what I mean. That it's a mature democracy.
Yes. Yes.
And it's strange to say this, but we have lessons to learn from Germany. I mean, we were the kind of midwife of the rebirth of the post-Third Reich Germany in 1945. We were the midwives of that. We drafted their constitution. And now, in a way, the roles have reversed, and we should be learning from them. We should be studying them, and we should certainly be reading the Chancellor and learning from this this really remarkable example.
Yes. You wrote a book about marriages and politics.
I did, yeah.
First ladies and presidents. And someone here has written on a card so I can ask about it.
Okay.
What's up with her husband?
What's up with her husband?
Yeah, tell us, because it is another thing that is just as enigmatic as everything else about her.
Yes, he's called the Phantom of the Opera, and because he loves the opera and because he's a phantom. But don't call him Mr. Merkel as Nicolas Sarkozy did. He is Herr Dr. Sauer, if ever a man suited his name.
Yes. Yes.
So an eminent scientist, biochemist, and they have what seems to be a perfectly harmonious and normal marriage. They've been together for 40 years. They lived together for a couple of years in sin. No politician in our country could get away with that.
Yes.
They lived together for more than a few years before marriage. But, she doesn't think that's any of my business or yours, frankly.
Yes.
What goes on inside her marriage.
Yes.
The only time that they're seen together is at the opera and at the Salzburg Music Festival and the like. But, I also think that part of her strength and the source of her stamina is that she claimed a right to a private life.
Yes.
And therefore she didn't exhaust herself performing 24/7. She never brought us into her kitchen the way politicians tend to. And even during the worst days of COVID, which she, by the way, handled expertly.
She did.
When she was doing Zoom calls like all of us, she never revealed any. There was nothing behind her to reveal what she was reading, the kind of flowers she likes, all the things that we learned about each other in the last few years. Nada. Blank wall behind her when she had her cabinet and other meetings. So she just drew a line and demonstrated that it's possible for a public person, for a politician, for a head of state to say, okay, I serve you during the day and at night if necessary, but you don't have to come into my kitchen or my bedroom.
Yeah, it's another
released energy, I think, for her.
Yeah, it's another score in which she's very different. You've written about private matters before. You've written about private people. How hard was it to write a book about Angela Merkel when she didn't really want to sit down for an interview? Probably was not thrilled that you were writing a book. But tell us about as a journalist, what was it like doing this book?
Well, in some ways, it was the toughest thing I've ever done. It's my 10th book, and so I knew from tough, but I wasn't prepared for how tough this would be because I wasn't interested in writing a book, frankly, about the machinations of the Bundestag. The very word is a room emptier in most countries outside of Germany.
I'm sure there's a huge market for it, but
I'm sure there's a huge market, but that wasn't my market. I wanted a human portrait, and that's precisely what she didn't want. But I think I was helped a little bit by the fact that my childhood under Soviet-ruled Hungary, and the fact that my parents had been arrested when I was 6 years old, and I didn't see my father for 2 years, and they were convicted as falsely as CIA agents for the crime of being good reporters, and I had, because I'm not stupid either, I sent her my Cold War memoir, Enemies of the People, which her staff told me she actually read. So there was this little bit of common sympathy, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, I was also researching in a language not my own.
Yes.
and I had to travel all over Germany, east and west, to get
Yes.
to get to the heart of who she is. So
How did you get to her friends to talk to you? This inner circle. Yeah.
well, that's what I do.
Yes. No. Whatever.
You win people's trust,
Yes.
and it helps to have a body of work,
Yes.
and for people to be assured that this is not going to be some gloves off.
Yes. Yes.
Not that there's any scandal in her life, alas. I mean, that's another astonishing thing. 16 scandal-free years.
Not a whiff
I
of
mean,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, can we name any other head of state without? We'll spend all day trying to think.
Rack my brain in this one now. Yeah. No, it's
yeah,
not. It's not
yeah,
easy to do.
Yeah. So, so it was, but it was, as I said at the outset, I think I was changed by this, and
Yes.
this trying to understand this unique character of our time, because she's got so many lessons for all of us. You don't have to be a politician
Yes.
to
Yes.
want to know. I sometimes felt that I was writing Machiavelli's Prince Volume 2.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Princess Volume 2.
Yes. The Queen.
Because it's really about power, how
Yes.
to get it and how to keep it.
Yes.
And that, I mean, who among us doesn't want to know about that?
Yes.
Whatever our occupation in life.
Yes. And the most unconventional politician to hold power in that way, which is the wonderful paradox of the book. Yeah. What's your next book?
My next book. This book has done well and has had many translations. So my publisher is eager for me to do another biography, which suits me fine. And so see if anybody can guess who this person is. So one of the best known women of our age, roughly, who has never had a serious biography written about her. Only peripherally politician, but okay, I can see it.
No.
We're not gonna.
What nationality?
American.
Okay.
Yeah. So not a politician, but you're not going to guess because she hasn't had. She's been trivialized, as many women are. Jackie Kennedy.
That's very good.
And a far more serious person than we think.
There's been no biography of
Oh, there have been tons, but
Okay, but
they've
not
all
seriously.
been, either breathless celebrity accounts
yes.
or Camelot, sappy Camelot stuff,
Yes.
sentiment, but nothing about, and very much like Merkel, she didn't want one. She never gave an interview. And is the only American First Lady never to have written her memoirs. So very, very private, and I like a challenge. There are many really terrific interviews that are now coming out from the Kennedy Library, slowly becoming available, and I'm in the process of reading them, and they're quite wonderful. And there are still people around who have vivid memories of her. So I've started on that, but
Will you come back to talk about it?
I would love to. Please,
Good.
please ask me, but not in this kind of weather.
No, we'll have you. There's a
Much as
2-week
I love
window.
you.
There's a 2-week window in the autumn when Toronto's nice, and we'll do it then.
Okay, let's
I
book
want to
it
thank
now.
you so much for coming
Oh,
up
thank
and
you
spending
so
this
much.
time with us, and thank you to all of you very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.